I had a foul taste in my mouth, as the mixture of cheap ale and regret sat on the top of my tongue. Laurits made sure that all three of us had drank at least 2 full cups before nightfall, saying it was the best way to endure hunger. Of course, as the night progressed, the drinks kept coming, and what little silver we made from the previous job was lost in an instant. My stomach has never been in such pain before, growling and twisting, growing more and more turbulent with each passing minute. I was at the point that I did not dare to eat a single morsel of food that day, despite the threat of starvation. Instead, I opted to fill my belly with cold water as to refresh my dehydrated body and to keep the sense of hunger at bay. Just the thought of a plate filled with warm food made me want to throw up in agony. Fortunately for me, the folks of Iltiranta were a kind bunch and often gifted me with fresh water, lifted from the many wells found throughout the city. But even with hosts that kind, the feeling of hangover did not wish to leave my body. Each time I took a glimpse at the sea next to the town, I imagined myself drinking it all, leaving nothing but a dry shore after me, just to quench my thirst and to heal my stomach. For the first time in my life, I couldn't ignore my greedy thoughts. I was forced to be a mercenary after all, hired by a certain Count Heinkinen, a fellow Ranthweg. I have never heard of the man before, but to my surprise, he welcomed us inside his keep the same day we wandered into his fief. Heinkinen welcomed us in and made sure that we felt comfortable inside his home. It was truly bizarre. We looked nothing like honorable guests, for our appearances resembled bandits more than anything else. Only in the morning did I come to the realization that all that kindness was due to Laurits. He was a powerful man after all, famous for his stubborn nature and renowned for his skill with the sword. If it wasn't for the stench or the battle-worn armor, one could have easily think he was nothing more than another lowly mercenary. But his reputation preceded him, and the Count was quick to offer us a warm bed for the night and a dangerous job to go along with it. For you see, dear reader, my youth was still a time of chaos, even before the great wars of King Domash. A week before I have put my foot inside the city of Iltiranta, the regent of our young king, Duke Tavinen, gave the order that all sorcerers in the realm were to be counted. One day, a strange hermit, only known as Turk the Smoke Wizard, was visited by Heinkinen's men, who wanted nothing more but to see if the old mystic was still alive. The sorcerer, who most likely went insane from his enlightening solitude, mistook this as an attack against his home and promptly burned the poor servants alive. For the past week, he plagued this land, shrouding village after village in black smoke, which caused the death of at least a dozen peasants. So the Count, hearing that the dreadful wizard was now roaming the streets of Iltiranta, gave us the task of stopping the old mage. I was not eager to start the hunt. Not only was my stomach still in pain, I wasn't familiar with sorcery of any kind. Naturally, as a noble myself, sorcerers would come and go on our land, blessing harvests and scaring off evil spirits. But I had never seen a man shoot flame from his fingertips before, nor have I witnessed a lightning strike being cast from someone's forehead. So when Laurits told me to act as bait, I was rightfully offended. "Worry not, my friend," he said happily. "With my perfect plan, you will never come close to harm's way." "Sir Grandmaster, that man can turn a hamlet to ash with his mind," I replied, trying to explain the dangers of magic to him. But no matter what I said, he would only reply with a quick shrug. He could probably freeze the blood inside my veins too. And my grandfather could do that as well. It's not a big deal. Maybe, but this Took is a complete lunatic. Well, so was my grandfather. It's not a big deal. These were the words which echoed inside my head throughout the entire night. It was that last sentence which made me go to my room and offer another piece of bread as sacrifice to the Creator. For hours, I felt as if this was my final day on this world. Despite his daring act against my cruel captors, way back when I first joined the Order, I often thought of Laurits as a curse. There was nothing I could do, however. A knight always had to do his duty, no matter who his master might be, and he should always strive forward a glorious victory. So I put on my uncle's chainmail, his moth-eaten tabard, and grabbed his arming sword. After that, I felt safer, but not safe enough. I also placed my grandfather's nasal helmet on my head and hoped that the Creator was still watching me from the heavens. It was an hour before midnight when I arrived to the spot. The city was silent and empty, with many of its citizens either asleep or hiding from that accursed sorcerer. I was standing in the middle of what appeared to be a marketplace, with empty stands and carriages littered all over the area. The moon's fiery surface shined down upon me, its light reflected by my chain shirt. By the order of the Count, many of his agents began to tell rumours all throughout the city. Within a few days, word began to spread of a young knight looking to buy occult trinkets with gold. This was all fabricated, of course, lies created to attract Tuk's attention. For even as a hermit, the smoke wizard was a big fan of foreign coinage. So I waited. I stood there for minutes, if not hours, wondering whenever the madman would show up or not. Even if he did, what was stopping him from turning my mortal flesh to ash? None of my equipment was good enough to engage someone with magical blood. I knew that if I was to anger the sorcerer, he would not hesitate to end my life. Each passing moment proved to be harder to endure than the last one, as the feeling of paranoia began to creep into my mind. Every sound I heard in the distance made me question my sanity, as I could feel a sense of approaching doom. I felt it even in the distant barking of dogs. Every shadow, nay, every inch on the square was under my watchful, although horrified gaze. That is why I shouted out in terror when Tushk's elderly hand patted my shoulder. I have heard of sorcerers using magic to hide themselves from the naked eye, but I never expected such a lowly hermit to use such a trick on me. Indeed, he was a prime example of his craft. Tuk wore nothing but a long red and dirty tunic, which ended roughly at knee-length. He had no footwear, and aside from his lush and lengthy beard, he had no hair anywhere else. "How?" I asked in a terrified tone. "Mind disturbance. It's a very cool spell, very classic indeed," replied the old fool. "It tricks your brain into ignoring my presence." "Ah, so that's how—" "Well, I never heard of such a thing before. You are truly a master of the arcane," I told him while wiping away the sweat on my brow. "It's not something that every good-for-nothing rascal can learn by themselves. Luckily, the rabbits near my hole were willing to share their secrets." After he said those disturbing words, silence fell upon the town square once more. I tried making sense of what he said, but my efforts proved to be futile in the end. Even his strange appearance alone was so foreign and bizarre, let alone the insane thoughts that might have swirled in his twisted mind. "So," continued the elderly hermit, "are you the one willing to trade?" Yes, that would be me. It's truly a miracle that we managed to find each other on this cold and lonely night." "Well then, young man, what are you looking for exactly? Fairy dust? A demon's charred flesh? Powder grinded from a Nephilim's bone, perhaps? I even have some flasks filled with my iconic mushroom ash cream." The old fool was filled with juvenile enthusiasm after I showed interest in his wares. If I wasn't aware of his murderous hijinks, I would have thought he was nothing more than a very, very eccentric old man. "Wow, what a selection to choose from. I think I'll have an It was then that I remembered my mission and the purpose of our meeting. Frantically, I looked around the market square, hoping to see Laurits and Kalervo hiding somewhere, ready to ambush the sorcerer. "I'll have To my misfortune, I was all alone with our target, who was still sure that I meant no harm towards him. That is why, with my incredible improvisation skills, decided to waste Tuk's time, hoping that my allies would show up soon. "Don't you have anything in a more solid state?" I asked him after I got myself together. "Fool, don't you know who I am? I am Tuck, the smoke wizard. If you wish to gain occult items with denser atoms, you should have searched for someone else." "Denser atoms?" I asked him, bewildered from his speech. "You have no clue what I just said, correct? Well, time for me to go then, because it seems that no one respects the elderly around these parts anymore." With those words, the old fool turned around, displeased by my lack of esoteric knowledge. "Wait, your wares will be fine. I was just speaking in riddles." After I said those words in panic, Took turned around, grinning. "All right. Tell me, young knight, what is it that you seek from me?" "Oh, that's easy. I want, I stopped to think, trying to use whatever I knew about the arcane to save my mission. What I want is a witch's balm, a frog's ashes, smokes from a dragon, and dust from a sand devil." Took nodded and smiled at my words. He then chuckled a little bit and put his hands together. Seeing him in such a state made me think that I might survive the night, although the things he would said next were the opposite of how he was behaving. "Before I give you those, can I also ask you a riddle?" asked the old fool. "Ah, sure. What do you call an idiot who has no clue about the occult, and he will never achieve gnosis without forbidden knowledge?" continued Took, the mad wizard of Iltiranta. "That is a terrible riddle. But I suspect that would be—" "Me?" I said with a defeated tone, realizing that Laurits' plan was terrible since the start. "Correct!" shouted the old hermit, right before forming his hands into fists. Just a few seconds later, he was engulfed in a thick cloud of black smoke, which quickly began to fill my lungs. Without much hesitation, I pulled out my sword while coughing, only to see the smoke disperse. To my misfortune, Took has already ran away, choosing to show mercy towards me for reasons that were beyond my understanding. A moment later, Laurits and Kalervo appeared next to me, winded from running and wheezing from chasing that accursed sorcerer throughout the night. Even Kalervo appeared to be tired, and he was a man of great strength and vigour. "Laurits." "Oh, Laurits, thank the heavens you're fine," said to me Laurits while trying to catch his breath. "Good to see both of you safe and sound. A bit too late, but at least no one appears to be hurt." I told him. "Indeed, we have actually encountered that madman a few minutes prior, but he just clenched his fist and turned into smoke." He then proceeded to show me the exact way Took casted his spell, obviously without any effect. "So that is why they call him the Smoke Wizard, because he's obsessed with creating smoke?" I asked, as I realized how childish sorcerers can be. "Nonsense. His name is most likely metaphorical, a reference to making a sacrifice and offering something to the Creator," explained the nobleman. "Well, I have heard him talk, and that old lunatic cannot even come up with a proper riddle." For an awkward moment, none of us said anything. We all just stared blankly at the ground, unsure of what will happen next. "This might be a controversial opinion," began Laurits, "but judging from our lack of captured wizards, there is a possibility that my plan has failed." Only then did we begin to think. So we thought, and thought, and thought, and we were thinking really hard. "I know!" I shouted, after an idea crossed my young mind. "Please, just let her go with us for a few minutes, please. I swear she won't get hurt. I'm begging you. Oh, please, oh, please." I stood in front of the money counter with teary eyes, begging loudly. Laurits said nothing, but I could sense that he had similar feelings under the mask of his helmet. Meanwhile, Kalervo has taken a small nap, sleeping under a venerable birch tree behind us. "Are you serious? You really want to take away my daughter and use her as bait, just because she's a virgin?" asked the man, who we have woken up just a couple of minutes ago. "That's just how mad wizards work, good sir," said Laurits. "They always kidnap virgin maidens." "Is this some sort of sick joke? No one told me the carnival was already here. continued the angered citizen, whose disgusted family was staring at us judgingly, right behind his back. We've been searching for literally an hour, sir," I told him after wiping the tear from my eyes. It was then that the man's daughter stepped forward, with her blonde hair glistening in the moonlight. "Why are you so sure that I'm even a virgin?" she told us. The money counter, however, did not appreciate her weird sense of humor. "No, not like that, father. It was just a jest." The girl tried to explain her humorous reply, but his father just shook his head in disappointment. "I'm not sure if this is working out, Laurits," explained Laurits after turning towards me. "We have been rejected by 20 households already. I do appreciate the effort, however. I personally think this was a great plan." Soon after that, my quiet sobbing was drowned out by the sound of approaching chainmail. To no one's surprise, the noise came from the Count's soldiers, led by a battle-hardened sergeant. All of us knew that they have come to check on the racket we have caused, and that we would not be able to outrun the law this time. "What the hell's going on, mercenary?" shouted the veteran with righteous fury. His eyes made it clear that he has seen many things throughout his career, but I doubt that his past battles were anywhere near like the events of that night. "Trying our best," shrugged Laurits. "The entire town has woken up, and now they are storming the castle, begging the Count to kick you 3 out. Sir, please, you must understand that we are very close to catching the sorcerer. All we need is some cooperation from these humble citizens of—" I have begun explaining our situation, but my words were cut short by the money counter, who slammed his front door shut. An awkward silence fell upon us once more, which, funnily enough, it allowed us to hear the sound of burning wood. We turned our heads towards the sound of crackling fire, only to see none other than Took sitting right next to a small campfire. He was busy roasting a rat above the flames, and most shockingly of all, the furred vermin was still moving. Took looked back at us, but quickly turned his attention back at his sickening meal. It took him a few seconds to realize we were there, but when he came to his senses, he began staring at us once more with surprised eyes. "Oh, homeworld, damn it," he muttered to himself before throwing his half-cooked rat away. The Count's men began approaching the rogue wizard with murderous intent, spears and maces ready to strike down upon the magical criminal. "All right, time's up, you bastard," said the furious veteran. Took sighed very, very loudly and stood up. The next thing I remember was how the space between the two parties has been engulfed by an enormous wall of fire, and before the 3 of us could do a thing, the guards were already set aflame. They screamed for a painful moment before their charred corpses hit the dusty roads of Iltiranta. "I've had enough! This city will tremble beneath my heel!" Took's mad words echoed on through the night, prompting Laurits to draw his short sword out of its sheath. Kalervo woke up to the deafening screams of the burning men, and with axe in hand, he too was prepared to fight. "Laurits, the time has come to kill your first sorcerer," said Laurits. I have also raised my blade, and with racing hearts we waited for the wizard to make his first move. The battle begun in a rough and inelegant manner. Took sent 3 small balls of fire flying towards us, a deadly spell me and Kalervo managed to dodge, while Laurits blocked it with his steel buckler. The wizard's hands began to glow in orange once more, and we knew that another barrage of spells was coming towards us. Took continued sending firebolts at Laurits, who refused to move out of harm's way. He blocked the spells with ease, while slowly but surely making his way towards his crazed foe. Busy with the almost equally insane nobleman, the wizard almost met his end at the hands of a charging Kalervo, who was only a few feet away from splitting Took's skull. But the sorcerer was lucky, for he reacted just in time to shoot a lengthy, fiery rope at the wild man. Kalervo's clothing was burned a bit, but he managed to save his life by rolling into safety just in time. Meanwhile, I could do nothing but watch as the events unfolded. With shame in my heart, I stood behind my friends, thinking on how I should act. Neither Kalervo nor Laurits could approach our seemingly inhuman enemy, for if they made even one step towards Tuk, he would cast hellfire unto them once more. This awkward stalemate lasted for another minute or so, when finally another idea popped into my head. "Guys, keep him occupied, and don't tire yourselves out," I told them while my heart raced faster than a horse. Only Kalervo replied by grunting in approval, although it was enough for me to continue working on my plan. The battle happened somewhere around the southern gate, an area I became familiar with over my painful pilgrimage for water. I knew that a well was somewhere nearby, and the cold water within it could prove to be useful. I did find it quite quickly, but I also knew that every second was precious. Within a minute or two, I have filled 2 buckets with water and began to make my way back to the fight. I had to handle my liquid weaponry with care, however, for it could spill out if I moved too fast. Luckily, I came back at the right time. Although tired, my fellow knights were still taking Tuk's attention away, giving me an opportunity I couldn't miss out on. I have put one of the buckets down while watching Kalervo's attempts to kill the sorcerer with his throwing axes. The wizard deflected the attacks with telekinesis, and as soon as the axes hit the ground, Tuk let out a crazed laugh. "Fools! Mortal flesh cannot compete with the blood of a mage," he said, barely able to hold back his excitement over destruction. To our surprise and horror, he then began to create another fireball, but this time it was twice as big as a human head. He rotated it around while moving it between his hands, while a circle of flames appeared around his feet. It was then that I realized that the fireball was still growing in size. Now was my time to act. Holding the bucket tightly to my chest, I have sprinted towards Tuk, my body and spirit ready to make a sacrifice if needed. "Laurits!" With a concerned tone, Laurits shouted my name, afraid of my fate. This caught the wizard's attention as well, and he turned around to face my wrath. With a newly born star in his hands, he grinned menacingly and pushed the fireball straight towards me. But Tuk was too late to act. There wasn't much distance between us, mostly 5 or 6 feet, enough for my risky tactic to work. Just in time, I have splashed the bucket's cold water towards him, weakening the fireball while extinguishing a part of his fiery wall. The weakened ball of flames didn't die out, however, as it flew straight inside my bucket, setting it ablaze. Although I had quite the bonfire between my own hands, my attack did not come to a halt. When I was close enough, I shouted from the top of my lungs and began bashing Tuk's head with my bucket. He yelped and squeaked from the attacks, weakening both his body and his spells. Kalervo leapt forward, and with his axe above his head, he burrowed the blade into the vile sorcerer's right shoulder. "Oh, shit!" Tuk grunted right before Kalervo snapped his neck, ending the smoke wizard's reign of terror. The city was finally safe. We took a well-deserved rest right there on the spot, drinking water from the second bucket while admiring the quiet. "For a man so afraid of fighting, you did a really good job today," said Laurits, while patting my shoulder. Kalervo grunted in approval again, while he cleaned his axe using Tuk's clothes. "Thank you. Now I know that even sorcerers can bleed," I replied jokingly. The night would have ended with silence if it wasn't for Count Heinkinen. He arrived dressed in knightly chainmail and with a retinue of 10 soldiers, ready to finish the fight. When he saw the corpse of Tuk, he took off his great helm and congratulated us. "You are truly worth the price, Laurits," he told us while smiling. He then gave Laurits our pay, which to my surprise was nothing more than a meagre purse of silver. "That doesn't seem like a lot. What do you think, Kalervo?" I asked. only to see that my axe-wielding friend was too busy picking his nose, which he followed by eating whatever treasure he found there. In hindsight, I doubt he understood the meaning of money.